Rule 3, General Definitions. This is a fairly straightforward rule offering you the term, which is italicized, and then the description, the definition that follows. Definitely give yourself some extra time spent on this rule because many test questions come from definitions. Even if you think it's an interaction between two vessels, really they're testing your knowledge of the definition of a power-driven vessel and the definition of a sailing vessel to know the right of way, to know the hierarchy. So Rule 3 will be prevalent throughout the book, but it'll then be partnered with Rule 18, the hierarchy, when we get into that rule later. So alpha. The word vessel is the description of any watercraft, including non-displacement craft, wing and ground, seaplanes, used or being capable of used as a means of transportation on the water. So go ahead and highlight vessel and transportation on the water. Not under the water, not submerged. We're not talking about submarines that are submerged. We're talking about vessels on the water. This is an all-encompassing term. If you're on a paddleboard, if you are in a bathtub with oars, whatever it might be, anything that is used or capable of being used as a means of transportation on the water is considered a vessel. Power-driven, we know that to be any vessel propelled by machinery. Sailing vessels are vessels under sail, provided that if they do have propelling machinery, if fitted, they are not using it. Now, I wrote the word becalmed here because a few test questions I've seen mention sailboats becalmed, which is referring to a situation where there's a sailboat out to sea powered by wind alone. However, the wind has died, so now they're just drifting. So a sailboat becalmed really just means they're drifting. There is no wind to actually propel her. Many sailing vessels, especially ocean-going sailing vessels, do have propelling machinery fitted. But for the purposes of the rules, a sailing vessel must be powered by wind alone. So I want you to write that next to Charlie. The term vessel engaged in fishing means any vessel fishing with nets, lines, trawls, or other fishing apparatus which restricts maneuverability. A fishing vessel is not referring to a vessel with trolling lines, other fishing apparatus which do not restrict maneuverability. That would be rods and reels and beers on a Saturday, not a vessel engaged in fishing. We are talking about a vessel with gear flung out the side, which couldn't move out of your way if it had to. It's severely restricted because of the apparatus. Think Deadliest Catch or some insane fishing vessel. I commonly think of in Finding Nemo when the dad, Marlin, or whatever his name is, gets caught in the net when he's trying to get to 42 Wallaby Way. That would be a fishing vessel, a vessel engaged in fishing. Seaplane includes any aircraft designed to maneuver on the water. Now, the next one is very important. Put an asterisk next to Foxtrot. The term vessel not under command means a vessel which through some exceptional circumstance. I want you to highlight that, some exceptional circumstance. A not under command vessel is unable to maneuver as required by these rules and is therefore unable to keep out of the way of another vessel. They're going straight to the top of the hierarchy. And what are some examples of a vessel not under command? It would have to fit the definition of some exceptional circumstance. Think steering casualties, fire in the engine room, really intense circumstances that would prevent this vessel from maneuvering as required and prevent them, actually make them unable to keep out of the way of another vessel. Gulf. The term vessel restricted in her ability to maneuver means a vessel which, from the nature of her work, is restricted in her ability to maneuver as required by these rules. And you'll notice the next phrase sounds an awful lot like the vessel not under command. So the vessel restricted in her ability to maneuver is from the nature of her work. She's unable to maneuver as required, but also unable to keep out of the way of another vessel. It goes on to give examples of this, but remember the definition, from the nature of her work. Highlight that. And we need to recognize that these descriptions, unable to keep out of the way of another vessel, are given for both not under command and restricted inability maneuver, making them both go to the top of the hierarchy. It's a very different circumstance, though, to be restricted in your ability to maneuver. You're carrying out your work that has restricted your ability to maneuver. The exceptional circumstance is most often entirely outside of your control. Class Bravo fire in the engine room is not the same as a vessel engaged in laying, servicing, or picking up a navigation mark. Sure, this vessel may not be able to keep out of the way of somebody else, but it's not a dire situation. It's actually their work. It's their job. Dredging, surveying, or underwater operations also fall under a vessel restricted in her ability to maneuver. We have UNREPs here, vessels engaged in replenishment or transferring persons, provisions, or cargo while underway. The next one is launching and recovering aircraft. That's us for sure. Engaged in mine clearance. Yes, we have minesweepers. Engaged in towing operations, which severely restricts the towing vessel and her tow in the ability to deviate from their course. All of those are examples of vessels restricted in their ability to maneuver, and you need to be able to recognize them as such. If you're given a test question that says a vessel engaged in mine clearance operations, you need to realize that they're also testing your definition of a vessel restricted in her ability to maneuver. I want you to highlight a vessel engaged in mine clearance operations, though, because or put an asterisk next to it, whatever's your thing. They have their own lighting characteristics, okay? So there are specific lights for a vessel restricted in her ability to maneuver. However, a mine clearance vessel will not be showing that. They will be showing something else. So her own identity lights, as well as a standoff distance. Now take a second to think about it. What is a standoff distance for a mine clearance vessel? If you said 1,000, you're correct, but remember the units. This whole book is in meters, so it's 1,000 meters, not yards. Make sure you report that in meters. Now we're on the international side. So on the international side of your book, with number 6, a vessel engaged in a towing operation, put an asterisk next to that and write astern only. We're going to refer to this later when we get into Rule 24, but international only astern, towing astern only. On the inland side, I would like you to put an asterisk next to this. It's given the same verbiage, but it's referring to all towing. So pushing ahead and towing alongside could also put up these lights. Inland, again, the culture of towing in the United States is much more prevalent, much more common means for mariners to be transporting cargo along the water. So inland rules allows all towing vessels to put these identity lights up, restricted in their ability to maneuver. If it's pushing ahead, towing alongside, or towing astern. However, internationally, it's towing astern only. We'll reference that again when we get to Rule 24 for towing operations. Again, here we are on the international side. Put an asterisk next to hotel, because then if you flip over to the inland side, you'll see that it's reserved. There is no such thing as constrained by draft in inland rules of the road. So if you get a question with constrained by her draft, it will say international only. If you read too quickly, if you skip over words, if you're just trying to fly through to the next question, this will easily trip you up. And I don't want anybody to miss a test question because they read it too quickly or they didn't spend enough time. They just assumed that they knew. So when you're taking these tests, you don't get points for turning it in early. You have an hour to complete the test. I want you to read every question carefully, beginning with the phrase inland or international only. So constrained by her draft, international only means a power-driven vessel. Okay, highlight a power-driven vessel. This is important because a fishing vessel, a sailing vessel, blah, 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 it's part of the definition. It can only be a power-driven vessel. And why is she constrained by her draft? Well, because her draft in relation to the available depth and width of the navigable water is severely restricted in her ability to deviate from the course she is following. From a ship handling perspective, this is a vital term because in international rules, you may be constrained by draft if you do not have much available depth of navigable water beneath your own keel, so that when you put the rudder over, it has less wash. There's less space for the water to move past and over your rudder, which would increase your turning diameter, increase your stopping distance, so that you really need to maintain the course that you are following, the course that you have planned. Because if you were to deviate from that, you would have a severely restricted ability to do so. That is when a vessel is constrained by her draft. And when might a vessel actually decide to do that? Put the cylinder up, put red up. That is when the master, the captain, will decide that. As navigator, if you felt that you needed to hoist or let other vessels know that you were constrained by draft, this you would have thought out with the chart, sitting down, knowing the available depth that you would have throughout a transit, and that at a certain point, maybe you could put a critical point into VMS, or you could have the quartermaster of the watch call to the captain, and that way you would know that you were entering this time, and the officer of the deck would be able to put this up. Always needs to be a discussion with the captain, though. So if it's not in the standing orders, if it's not in the navigation bill, I would write this down as something to discuss with your captain. If we flip the page, the word underway is referring to a vessel not at anchor, made fast to the shore or aground. So there are 3 circumstances when a vessel is not underway. Otherwise, the vessel is underway. Length and breadth of a vessel means her length overall, greatest breadth. Put a asterisk next to kilo for me, because this is vessels deemed to be in sight of one another, only when one can be observed visually from the other. This will include binoculars, big eyes, but based on court precedents from the book Farwell's, optical sights, electronic optical sights mounted on the mast would not be considered in sight of one another. Restricted visibility means any condition in which visibility is restricted by any of the following: fog, mist, falling snow, heavy rainstorms, sandstorms, or any other similar causes. It doesn't list out every sort of meteorological force that could restrict your visibility, but consider things like volcanic ash, or if you'd been underway with the terrible fires in Australia earlier this year, all that smoke billowing out to sea would also restrict your visibility. Air pollution can also restrict your visibility. When I went to Shanghai, the air quality was very poor and hardly saw the sun, even though the weather report noted that there would be no clouds, but the air pollution was so thick that we really couldn't see the sun. The term wing and ground is a craft, a multimodal craft, which in its main operational mode flies in close proximity to the surface by utilizing the surface effect action. The surface effect action is a lot, you probably have seen that with ducks when they're flying very close to the surface, or any other sort of marine life, a bird that is, the air pressure is different close to the water's surface. And so as long as the sea state is calm, these things can zip. I mean, I'm talking 200 knots. They can fly, literally fly over the surface of the water. Commonly seen perhaps in the Black Sea or near Greece. I've never encountered one, but obviously keep a good lookout and know that they can gain incredible speeds. Flipping the page to the inland side, November and Oscar refer to the Western rivers and the Great Lakes, which will be no study for the purposes of this class. So moving on to Papa. Secretary in this book means the secretary of the department in which the Coast Guard is operating. We know that to be the Secretary of Homeland Security. Quebec, inland waters, means the navigable waters of the United States, shoreward of the navigation demarcation lines, dividing the high seas from the harbors, rivers, and other inland waters of the United States, and the waters of the Great Lakes on the United States side of the international boundary. Knowing where those lines of demarcation are important to knowing what part of the rule book you're operating under. Inland rules, or rules on this side, mean the inland navigation rules and annexes there too that are going to govern the conduct of vessels, specify the lights, shapes, and sound signals that apply on inland waters. International regulations is referring to just that. The international regulations for preventing collisions at sea, COLREGs 72, including annexes currently in force for the United States.